You know, it's crucial for women's voices to be heard on an equal platform. We're 51% of the population, and it's ridiculous that our voices are so unheard, that we're so invisible when it comes to all forms of media.
It really matters that half the human race is missing from decision-making across public life in Britain. And one of the reasons it matters is because the country is in a real mess. And it's in a real mess because it's been dominated by elites of rich white men who have made some really bad decisions.
Well, we've come quite a long way since 1918, when women were able to get into Parliament, but we still only have 145 women out of 650. So we're on a very long, slow trajectory.
I think it's important to situate the issue of women's representation as one within a wider context of gender inequality. What we're talking about here is the power hierarchies and the power structures that really govern and reproduce gendered norms, gender stereotypes, and actually do have an effect on women and men's lives.
The main reason women's voices aren't heard in the media is to do with power, as with so much else. You know, the fact is that although there are quite a few women doing very well in terms of whether it's newspaper columns or whether we see them in front of the screen, when it comes to positions of power, women are still largely invisible. So whether that's boardroom decisions, whether it's about commissioning news or setting the news agenda, we're still very much not in those rooms, not in those conversations. And as a result of that, the news that we get is very male-centric news.
We live in a democracy. We're supposed to live in a democracy. Part of living in a democracy is having equal representation. Women make up over half of the population, and yet within the media we are effectively silenced. And when women are represented within the media, it is overwhelmingly, they are overwhelmingly sexualised and objectified. Women are not portrayed as equal thinking human beings. We are reduced to a sum of body parts, and that has an effect on how women are viewed and treated within society. This has a really damaging effect because it has a silencing effect. It sends out a message that the public space is not for women and girls, and that when women and girls occupy this public space, that they are bombarded with this level of abuse, and that does affect women and girls' aspirations to want to occupy these positions.
There's a huge lack of diversity in terms of representation of women. Certain kinds of women are still not deemed acceptable, whether that's on screen or whether that's in newspapers. Diversity comes in many forms. So we're talking about the representation of women in society. We're talking both about gender, but also about race, about disability, about sexuality, about age, about size, about geographic diversity, making sure that all the women we see in the media don't happen to just be, you know, in London. It's a really vast thing, and it's really crucial that society is reflected within our media.
There are a number of barriers that prevent women from entering the world of politics on an equal footing to men. Some are practical barriers and some are cultural. Practical barriers might include things like parliamentary procedure, so the sitting hours, the lack of formalised paternity and maternity care for MPs, lack of childcare provision, but might also include things like costs of standing for selection and election. The cultural barriers are also well documented and might include the fact that in order to kind of engage in these circles of power, there are certain networks and there's certain types of shoulder tapping that does exist to rise to those positions of power, and often women are excluded from those networks.
Well, the Counting Women In Coalition is a group of organisations that have come together with a really ambitious target of getting 50-50 representation in Parliament. And the biggest single issue that we face is political parties selecting women as candidates in winnable seats.
Political parties control who stands as candidates and therefore who gets elected. Until political parties create demand for women candidates, we will not get them coming through. One of the things about quotas is that they create demand, and the idea that there is not a supply of women willing and able to go into politics is wrong. It's simply that there isn't the demand.
But I think one of the problems is that we all see democracy as somewhere we live rather than something we actually have to participate in and actually create a culture of participation and active involvement. So I think that's something that we all have to take a responsibility for, as well as the media and the institutions.
Democracy for women can't just stop at the workplace door. Pay and conditions are really important to working women, but having a real voice and being listened to and having some power sharing at work is important too. So we need a new settlement which includes greater workplace democracy. You know, there are lots of issues that matter at work: pay, conditions, hours, but also the way you're treated. And all the working women I speak to, issues like having a bit of respect at work, not being patronised, not being passed over for promotion, being listened to and actually having your concerns taken into account. These are the issues that matter week to working women.
Quotas are the most effective way of getting women elected and getting them into Parliament or other elected bodies. If we want to get women into Parliament, then they have to be selected in winnable seats. And there are different ways that the political parties can do that. We have to respect that the different parties have different cultures and will find different mechanisms, but they all have to engage seriously with this issue.
So I think there are things about the culture of politics that we need to resolve, but also things about the wider culture of our democracy, in order to make both women and men from all excluded groups feel that they have a place in our public life and have a place in public decision making.
But it's absolutely essential that we don't lose sight of the fact that it's not just about Parliament. Parliament is very important, and parliamentarians themselves can be role models and be very important in bringing other women through into politics. But it is not just about Westminster, it's about every aspect of our political life.
So it's important that we campaign for women to have access to power and agency over their own lives and their wider world, and that starts at local level, community level politics, or might not even be phrased as politics, but it's ensuring that women have the access to the services, they have engagement with policy processes and decision making that enables them that choice over their own lives.
I want to see real equality for women from all walks of life, and it's not just about smashing glass ceilings. For many women, it's about getting beyond the glass skirting board. So to be relevant today, we've got to address the concerns and priorities of all working women and pay special attention to those women who get the worst deal, who are on the lowest pay, the worst conditions, who have the least choices. I want to see them have more power and a stronger voice too. The trade union movement is now 50-50 men and women. It's the only independent democratic movement of working people. It should be in all of our interests to see trade unions grow, to see collective bargaining, that ability to have a say over your terms and conditions increase, and to give women a real opportunity to be heard about the priorities that matter most to them.
I'm a big fan of quotas and targets, I think, and also positive action. I think those are some really practical ways that we can make sure that our media becomes much more reflective of the society that we're in. I think that it's also important to make sure that women and ethnic minorities and women of different backgrounds, geographical mixes, religions are able to enter the boardroom so that they're making powerful decisions. It's very easy just to put women in front of camera, for example, or to give them columns, but actually, unless we're commissioning newspaper features, unless we're commissioning TV programmes, the agenda itself is not going to change. So it's not just about making sure the shop window looks different. It's making sure that backstage, where the big decisions are made, where the next generation is hired from, also changes.
We urgently need change, not just in the workplace, but across society. We need to create a fairer, stronger society, and that in turn will create a fairer, stronger economy. But to do that, I don't think there are any shortcuts. As women and as men who support equal rights for women, we need to get organised, and we need to take our message out much further than we're doing at the moment. We need to call politicians to account. It can't be right that an elite of wealthy, mainly white, mainly men, are taking decisions that impact on the lives of ordinary working people, that make our lives much harder.
It's important that we have visible role models, so women in politics, women in the world of power, that can be examples for future generations of women, so that they can feel inspired, they can feel empowered, that should they wish to enter the world of politics, enter the world of business, that is a viable route for them. And I think women, young women, are constantly bombarded with objectification in the media, with kind of vilification of women in the media, misogyny, sexism, and we need to counteract this, and this is a really important campaign to ensure that girls growing up today know that they can be the leaders of tomorrow.